working on your surveys for today on the purple sheet, and also the follow-up survey permission slip. If you could have those done, and then you can turn those in at the registration desk when you're done, and I'll remind you when we're done as well. But it's my pleasure to introduce Frank King. He is a suicide prevention and postvention public speaker and was a writer for The Tonight Show for 20 years, and is a corporate comedian. I'm not sure what a corporate comedian is, but we're going to probably find out what that's all about.
Clean, Eric.
Clean, okay. Syndicated humor columnist and a podcast personality, and has been featured on CNN's Business Unusual. Depression and suicide run in his family. He thought about killing himself more times than he can count. He's fought a lifetime battle with depression and thoughts of ending his life, turning that long journey, dark journey of the soul into a TED Talk, a matter of life or death, and sharing his life-saving insights on mental health and emotional awareness with corporations, associations, youth, middle school, and high school, and college audiences at the suicidepreventionspeaker.com. As an inspirational and motivational public speaker and trainer, he uses life lessons from the above, as well as lessons learned as a rather active consumer of healthcare, both mental and physical, to start the conversation, giving people who battle mental and emotional illness permission to give voice to their feelings and experiences surrounding depression and suicide, and to create a common pool of knowledge in which those who suffer and those who care about them can swim.
Yes.
Ladies and gentlemen, Frank King.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you very much, Eric. Thank you very much. Have another round of applause for TJ. Can I TJ? Yeah, I tell you, I got a little emotional. TJ and I met this morning. We stayed at the same hotel. We rode over together. We were chatting back and forth, and talking about depression, suicide, and drug and alcohol use, and the intersection of depression, suicide, drug and alcohol use. And I believe the intersection actually is that when someone is thinking about ending their life, dying by suicide, they generally do not want to die. I did not want to die. They just want to end the pain. And I said to TJ, I believe, and you can back me up on this, that with the drug and alcohol use, oftentimes they just want to end the pain. I got a little emotional when he was speaking because somebody I care a great deal about earlier this week, we were talking about there have been 19 overdoses, heroin overdoses in Eugene, Oregon, where I live, in the last month. And the reason they believe is because somebody spiked the heroin with fentanyl. And so all the police officers, both the city cops and the sheriffs, are carrying the nasal spray Narcan. And the person who I love and I care a great deal about said to me, just let them die. I said, well, they said, they're heroin addicts. If they didn't want to die, they wouldn't be doing heroin. And I'm watching TJ, and I'm thinking, the heroin addict, I do not believe, wants to die, generally speaking. They just want to end the pain. And I got emotional because I thought, what if somebody had taken that attitude with TJ? Then he wouldn't be doing the wonderful work he is doing today. And I think the best way to express that is seeing people not as junkies or disposable, but as resources. I think that's a brilliant way to frame that situation. So, sorry, I got a little choked up. Somebody has to be unafraid to lead the free parade. You guys know Big and Rich? It's a duo. Yeah, and that's my job right there. Lead the free parade. Yep, start the conversation. Hi, I'm crazy. Hi. My whole family's nuts. More nuts than a 25-pound bag of squirrel food. Yeah. I guess because nobody really wants to admit that. And I've got my pride, thank you. My pride went in the Chapter 7 bankruptcy, so I don't have any pride anymore. Doesn't get in my way. I know you're all thinking, he's wearing no socks, that is correct. I don't know. Yeah. What you don't know is matching underwear. A, just see if you're paying attention. B, Well, you know, it's not your average suicide prevention, postvention keto. I am a comedian by trade. I just came off a cruise ship. I was 2 weeks in Alaska working a cruise ship. I say working. I did 2 weeks and 2 shows in 7 days, so it's not that. And leaving next week on the 6th for Hawaii. Hit a couple of ports and then sailed to Fiji. Again, 2 shows in 7 days. So I'm a comedian by trade. I was born to be a comedian, I do believe. People always ask that, were you born funny? Yes, as a matter of fact, an amazing thing, funny thing happened on the way down the birth canal. What I did not know, I always knew I wanted to be a comedian. What I did not know was how I could do that and make a difference. You know, change or save a life. And I didn't know that until I was, I guess, 52 and was close to ending my life. And I realized that I did have something to say, I did have something to teach, to share. And that's the suicide prevention. This is one of my favorite quotes. Whoa, this is 3 of my favorite quotes. Every year in the United States, 8 million people contemplate suicide. 1 million people attempt it. 45,000 a year die by suicide. That's 1 every 15 minutes. That means from the time I start to the time I finish, 4 people somewhere in this country, on average, will have ended their lives. And I find that sad and fascinating. What I find fascinating about it is, on 9/11, in those terrorist attacks, roughly 3,000 people lost their lives. Well, every year in the United States, 15 times that many die by suicide. And hardly anybody's talking about it. And I find that fascinating because I have discovered, that the mere mention of the words depression and suicide out loud elicits the most amazing responses from people, some of whom I have just met. This is a Holland American cruise ship. It's one of my favorites. It's a Prince and Dam. I'm working it. I am in the Lido one morning. I can't find a seat. I look, there's a woman and a table for 2, empty chair. I point, she nods, I sit. And then she looks up and she goes, "Hey, are you the comedian?" I said, "Hey, did you enjoy the comedy show?" She goes, "I did very much." I said, "Well, then I'm the comedian." She goes, "What would you have said if I told you I didn't like the comedy show?" I'm a plumber from Des Moines." She asked me, "Is comedy on cruise ships all you do?" That's a very common question, and no, I only do 12 weeks or so a year. I said, "No, I'm a public speaker," and I said, "If you don't mind me bragging a little bit, I just nailed down a TED Talk, my first TED Talk." She goes, "I love the TED Talks. What's the topic?" Well, having had this conversation many times, I believed I knew what was coming. So I said to her, "Depression and suicide," and started to count down in my head. 3, 2, 1. She goes, "I tried to kill myself twice." We just met. It's almost as if the people I talk to, and when I mention those 2 words, they've been waiting, just waiting for somebody to utter the magic, or in this case, the tragic words, depression and suicide, to give voice to their feelings and experiences surrounding mental illness, depression, and suicide. She goes, "First time I tried, it was college, it was half-hearted, not particularly serious." The second time, though, more serious. She said, "I graduated college, I graduated medical school. I had the knowledge, had the equipment, had the IV started in my ankle," she said. Suicide cocktail in one hand, syringe in the other, getting ready to load it up. Phone rings. She thinks, well, should I answer it? She decided, yes, I should, because might be somebody who would worry, come over and interrupt. Picks up the phone, it's her 13-year-old son. She goes, "I don't know if he heard something in my voice or had a premonition, but he said to me, 'Mom, don't do anything.'" She said, so I did it. I didn't give up on the idea of suicide, but I decided not to do it that day because I knew that he would always feel guilty. Wasn't there something he could do, something he could say to stop me from dying by suicide? The good news is there are things you can do, there are things you can say to save somebody's life. Because 8 out of 10 people on average are ambivalent about suicide. They hope somebody will say something. 2 out of 10 on average, they're hell-bent on dying and there's nothing you can do. We cannot, unfortunately, save everybody. So I said to her, "Well, how old is he now?" She said, "He's 21. I said, "Does he know his phone call saved your life?" She goes, "No. How do you start that conversation?" So that became the theme, the overarching theme of my first TED Talk was start that conversation, because that's what I discovered about depression and suicide, or mental illness and suicide. You can make a difference, you can save a life, and you can do it oftentimes by doing something as simple as starting a conversation. Because 8 out of 10 people are ambivalent. And I did my TED Talk in 2012. Are you guys familiar with the TED Talks? Do you know the TED Talks? Yep. Okay. Because I get that question occasionally. Comedian doing a TED Talk? Seth Godin, marketing guru, in his TED Talk in 2009 said, if you're looking for an idea worth spreading, and that, by the way, is the overarching premise of the TED movement, is you have to have an idea worth spreading. The one I'm pitching now is mental health and the orgasm. Yes, I did some research. Yes, treating your depression single-handedly. Turns out I've been medicating for years. And Coeur d'Alene, TEDx Coeur d'Alene, I got an email the day after I submitted. Dude, that is an amazing idea. Now, if I could just get the committee to go along. But that's the idea, is an idea worth spreading. And Seth Godin said, if you're looking for an idea worth spreading, you just need 2 things. One is a tribe. My tribe are people who live with mental illness. I have major depressive disorder. If you know or don't know, it's 3 days to 2 weeks recurs. And it's generally not situational. I've been most wretchedly depressed in my life at some of the best times in my life. I always worried what I would do if I got that depressed and things had gone to heck in a handbasket. And I found out. But and I have another mental illness called chronic suicidality. So that's my tribe. Major depressive disorder, chronic suicidality. Chronic suicidality is much more rare. It means that for me, the option of suicide as a solution for a problem, large or small, the option of suicide is a solution for me for problems large and small. Give you an example. A couple of years ago, my car broke down. I had 3 thoughts. Unbidden. 1, get it fixed. 2, I could buy a new one. Or 3, I could just kill myself. I know. To normal people, it's like, what? But every time I do a keynote, I would say almost every time I do a keynote, somebody comes up after the keynote and they believe they have that mental illness. I did a NACA, National Association Campus Activities National Showcase, 800 students. A young woman comes up afterwards. She goes, I liked your keynote. I said, thank you. She goes, well, I gotta tell you, you made me weep. How did I make you weep? She goes, well, you remember you said that your car broke down, so you had 3 thoughts, get it fixed, buy a new one, or you could just kill yourself? She goes, I've been having those thoughts my entire life. I didn't know it had a name. I thought I was the only one, some kind of freak. And when you said that out loud, I realized for the first time in my life that I am not alone. And I wept. That's the power of starting the conversation. And that, it happened what's the day? Thursday? Happened yesterday between 11:30 and 12:30 in the afternoon at Spokane Falls Community College. I'm on the NACA speaking circuit at colleges. There's a young man in the audience. I'm going through my slides. I get to a slide in there where there's the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline and the text line, those numbers, and then move on. And then I went to Q&A. And he said, could you back it up a little bit? Back up the slides. So I started backing them up. I go, this one, no. Got to the slide with the phone numbers on it. He goes, that one right there. Phone numbers and the text line number. Text line, by the way, is 741-741. You text the word hello or hi or connect to 741-741 because younger people are often more forthcoming in text. And so he wrote down the numbers and we moved on. When he came up after the presentation, it almost always happens. I tell the audience, look, we'll do some Q&A, but if you don't want to ask a question sort of in public, I'll stick around until everybody's had their questions answered individually. And I usually get 3 to 6 people lined up. And he comes up, and I noticed as I looked up, there were tears running down his face. He was crying. He goes, is that chronic that chronic suicidality, that's me. And I'm no diagnostician, I'm not a psychiatrist, I'm not a psychologist. I didn't even stay at a Holiday Inn Express last night. Yeah. But the symptoms he spoke of led me to believe that he does perhaps have chronic suicidality. And I said, well, first of all, you're not alone. Second of all, I said, are you having thoughts of suicide? Because if you know somebody is depressed, that's the question you have to ask. And ask it in that way. Are you having thoughts of suicide? Not, you're not going to do something stupid, are you? No. Are you? And he said, yes, I am. And so the next thing you asked him is, do you have a plan? He said, yes, I have a plan. What is your plan? He told me his plan. And I said, well, I think my job at that point as a mental health first responder is not to leave him alone at that moment. And to, kind of like a paramedic, get him to a professional mental health person. And I said, do you have a mental health counselor or a therapist? He goes, yes, I started my therapy last week. I said, well, we need to have a chat with the staff here in the mental health facility at the college, and I would encourage you, when you see your therapist again, to mention chronic suicidality, because again, I'm no diagnostician, but it does sound to me. He thought he was alone, he thought he was a freak, he didn't know the name for it. You know, he thought maybe he was just looking for attention because he had all these thoughts of suicide. I said, no, I think that's what you've got, brother. It's a big tribe. I said, here's the good news, you do not have to act on it. I'm 61 years old. The young woman who came up at the NACA showcase afterwards and said I made her weep, she said to me, I was hoping I would grow out of it. Yes. He said exactly the same thing. Yeah, I was hoping I'd grow out of it. I go, dude, I'm 61. If I'm going to grow out of it, I need to get started. I'm going to go right now. But that's the power of starting the conversation. All right. Let's see. Vacuum. Oh, the vacuum is, and I've already said this, hardly anybody is talking about it. 15 times the number of people who died on 9/11 die every year in this country of suicide. And that doesn't include the 70,000 accidental drug overdoses, 30,000 of which involve opioids, and how many of those are accidental? We don't know. It's hard saying not knowing. As my wife was saying, there I am. That's Comedy Boy. Yeah, that's the smile I paste on when I get out of bed in the morning, put one foot in front of the other, and walk around like nothing's wrong. That's what people who have mental illness do. People who are neuronormal have no idea the energy and courage it takes just to get out of bed some morning, paste on that smile, and walk through the world and not let anybody know that anything is wrong. Don't want to burden anybody. Got depressed the other day, my wife said, hey, how you doing? I said, fine. Because I knew me telling her that I was cycling down, it wouldn't make me feel any better, it'd make her feel worse. So, I got a little medication. I knew it wasn't going far. I knew what triggered it, so I had a handle on it. When I did my first TED Talk, the one I just mentioned, I had to sit my wife down before she watched it. We had been married at that point 26 or 7 years. I said, listen, before you watch this TED Talk, you need to know some things about me that you do not know. I don't want you to hear the first time from me on stage during a TED Talk. She had no idea how depressed I'd been, how close I'd come to dying by suicide, because people with mental illness are oftentimes great actors. Covered up. Speaking of which, this is me, Comedy Boy, and this, with apologies to the Showtime series Dexter, is my dark passenger. The only difference between me and Dexter is the only person this guy wants to kill is me. He's been after me for decades. A friend of mine's a photographer. He took the photograph with a big smile. He said, Frank, look, I got an art project. What I'd like you to do is put on a gray t-shirt. It's natural light, real film, and let something of your personality shine through. And I'd never let anybody see that before. I'd never actually consciously. So I go, okay, I got something for you. And he caught it. And what's really sad is that guy's a lot better looking than I am. Looks a whole lot like Mark Harmon's younger brother. Actually, I've only shown this, I've only let that part of my personality shine through twice. Once in this photograph. Once I had an audition for a show called Leverage. It stars Timothy Hutton. It films in Portland. My agent sent me out. Get this. It's a part of a hired killer. Really? You know a hired killer who wears tassel loafers, Steve? Yeah, exactly. So I decided the only way I was going to get it was if I did like a Nicolas Cage audition where I like character acting. Get into character when you leave the car, stay in that killer character through the entire audition until you get back to the car. So I put on my gray t-shirt, got a jacket, went to Big Lots, got some badass looking military sunglasses. Yeah, and I went in. And if you've ever done an audition, there's a person there with you sign in your union affiliation. I'm in SAG and AFTRA. Put the time, and then a nice young woman said to me, anything else you need? Okay, it's a dirty word, but it's actually in the vernacular of the armed services. She goes, anything else you need? I go, yeah, where's the shitter? Which, in military terms, is the bathroom. And she's just like a deer in headlights. The bathroom, it's upstairs. So I come back down, sit, I go into the room where the audition is going to happen. There are two young women there and a camera. And that's how an audition works. They've got the other person's part in their hand. They're going to play the part of the other person in the scene. So they say, I think the scene was, it's a professor who has a file that the killer wants, and the killer has kidnapped his son. So the young woman says to me, she's reading the script, I'd like to trade this file for my son. And I said, I'd like to sleep with Heather Locklear, but I think we're both going to be disappointed. Which is not actually the line, but it's the gist of the scene. So then she says to me, okay, now try that with your sunglasses off. And I cocked my head slightly, I took a beat, and I went, no. And she said, thank you very much, we'll be in touch. I get back to my car, I break character, the phone's ringing. It's my agent. I said, hey man, I get the gig? No, it's worse than that. How could it be worse than not getting the part? Well, from this point forward, you are not allowed back in that building. See, I let that shine through. I go, why not? He goes, you scared those two young women so bad. I go, what did I do? He goes, that's a freaky thing. I said, what did he say that scared you? And they said, no. One word. He goes, I didn't think you could act, but I believe you got it. Now, think about this. You're casting the part of a killer. It's one thing to cast somebody who looks like Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, It's another thing to cast somebody who looks like me, but scares you so bad you won't let him back in the building. Who would you give the part to? My agent goes, Quentin Tarantino had been directing that episode, you'd be working the rest of your life. Just for the choices you made. So that's my dark fan. And he came, by the way, awfully close to ending my life in 2010 in April, but we'll talk about that in a minute. Now, the question often comes up, and I think I mentioned this. A comedian talking about depression and suicide, that's always the elephant in the room, generally. I get that question all the time. I think a comedian's a good choice, I'll tell you why. Number one, comedian's job is to speak truth to power on behalf of the powerless. And I believe I speak truth to the power of mental illness on behalf of those often powerless in its grip. Number two, I believe, and this is sort of the theme of the event, where there's humor, there is hope. Where there's laughter, there is life, and nobody dies laughing. And three, depression and suicide run in my family. That's my grandma Dixie, my mom Dixie on her lap, my Uncle Frank, my Aunt Christine. It's 1929, eve of the Depression. She's got to get those three kids and herself through the Depression. Her husband, my grandfather, just died, very young. She's got to get them all through the Depression. She did. She got them through the Depression. She got them through high school, college, saw them all married. And then her job done, she ended her life. My mother found her. My mother couldn't reach her on the phone, so she went over to the house. And anybody here old enough to remember the milkman? The milk bottles. The milk was spoiling on the stoop. It was the only thing my grandmother had overlooked. She closed all the windows and doors. She'd written the checks for the bills, addressed the envelopes, stamped them, put them on the kitchen counter, pinned her will to her house coat, and turned on the gas, blew out the pilot light, sat down at the kitchen table, and wrote this note.
My dear children, I am so sorry to leave you, but it can't be helped. All summer long, I have been going downhill. Doctors have done all they could, but in spite of them, my nerves have gone completely shot. I can't sleep, I can't eat, and my mind is sadly unbalanced. Under such conditions, life is absolutely unlivable. Be good, and meet me in the glory land. Heavenly Father understands. He has forgiven me, and I know you will too. Always my best love. Mother.
She did not want to die. Her gears were slipping and she knew it. By reports from other family members, the mental institution in Raleigh, North Carolina, where I was born and raised, was one of the better ones in the country. But we're talking late 40s, early 1950s. So it was not a pleasant place. She knew that's where she'd end up. So to end the pain, she ended her life. That's my great aunt, sitting next to the guy with the beard. She, my grandmother's sister. Again, generational depression and suicide. She decided to end her life. My mother and I found her. My mother couldn't reach her. Bundled me into the car. I was 4 years old, and we went over to where she lived. And I'll spare you the details. If you go to YouTube and type in my name and suicide, it'll come up. I'll save you the story. But if you are already hardwired for depression and suicide, perhaps, and as well as chemically wired for it, and you're that close to a suicide, the chances that I would attempt to take my life at some point go up quite a bit. So, and as I mentioned, pretty much everybody in my family is on one psychotropic or another. The good news there is we're all very open about it. So the next generation, nieces and nephews, they have no problem coming forward, coming out, as it were, if they're having trouble mentally. It was depression or anxiety or panic attacks, whatever. They don't hide it because they know it's, as TJ talked about, the stigma. There's no stigma in our family for mental illness. If there was stigma, there would be nobody at the family reunion. Because, yeah. Oh, and by the way, on tobacco cessation, my sister and I are the only ones, we're from North Carolina. I mean, tobacco was king for decades. My sister and I are the only two people in the family who don't smoke. Yeah, when we go to the family reunion, they make us stand outside. Yeah, and by the way, on smoking, the friend of mine kicked cocaine, couldn't kick smoking, and he was feeling bad about that. And I said, look, dude, here's the deal. The cigarette companies, they've got a building full of scientists in Richmond, Virginia, who are doing nothing but trying to figure out a way to make tobacco more addictive or whatever, and faster than, and they've actually done that. They put ammonia in it and all these other chemicals that she mentioned. It's become, they've actually created what they call tobacco crack. They've got to a point where it moves very quickly across the brain-blood barrier. So you're hooked harder and faster. I said, now think about this. That's the cigarette companies in Richmond. In Cartagena, where they're growing and producing cocaine, there's not a building full of scientists in Cartagena going, man, we got to figure out a way to make this stuff more addictive. They just depend on the addictive qualities of cocaine. So it would seem logical you would have trouble quitting one and not the other. Cigarette companies, I don't know if you remember this, but 2 decades ago, they recalled several million Marlboro cigarettes. Do you know why? The filters had a chemical in it called methyl isothiocyanate. Why I can remember that, can't find my car keys, I have no idea. Yeah. If the chemical sounds familiar at all, there was a big gas leak in Bhopal, India one time, killed all sorts of Indians in Bhopal, and it was the same chemical. So these cigarettes had that in the filter, and they recalled millions of them, and my joke was, yeah, because they're not in the business of killing people quickly. Yeah. I did a show in Richmond, Virginia. There were a couple of guys down front worked at Philip Morris. I said, I always want to know, do you guys get free cigarettes? Yeah. 2 cartons a week. Really? I did the math in my head. I'm like, that's a lot of money. And then it occurred to me, yeah, but you know what? Philip Morris is making it up on the back end on the pension plan. What's that, Bob? A couple of weeks of retirement? Hell, have a carton on me. Have you tried the ones with the funny filters? Yeah, so tobacco, that's an evil bunch. That is, when I was a kid, do you guys remember this? Bubblegum cigarettes, bubblegum cigars? The same guy who delivered cigarettes in the little store where I bagged groceries delivered that. They were setting us up. They were programming us to smoke. Amazing. All right. Empathy. There's the problem. It's easy to be sympathetic to someone who has a mental illness. It's very difficult, if you haven't been there, done that, to be empathetic. if you have not walked them out. Same with, I'm sure, same with addiction to alcohol or drugs. If you've not been there, it's hard. It's like the person who said to me, let them die. Well, they've never been there. They have no context. So, you guys remember these old diving suits? Yeah, they came with these because they had to weight you down because they're filling the suit with oxygen or air. Depression for me is like this. Strapping on a pair of those first thing in the morning and doing my best just to put one foot in front of the other until I can take them off, go back to bed and pull the covers over my head. That's what depression is like to me. So the best I can do is a simile, but that's what it's done. I left this in today because of the Spokane Falls Community College where the kid asked me to back up. I thought there might be somebody here today who's struggling, thinking, man, I wish I had those numbers. The app you can buy, I believe it's a free app, and you load it up with the phone numbers of your friends, family, loved ones, and then you can hit one button if you're struggling in crisis, and it'll text everybody, I'm struggling, I'm having trouble. The Suicide Prevention Lifeline, and then that's the text line if you're more forthcoming in text. So, okay. Oh, and this is a program, you guys know this? Mental Health First Aid. Yeah, they charge somewhere between nothing and about $25, 8-hour class. They throw in pizza. It's a great primer. It's a great mental health first responder 101. Gives you a broad overview of mental illness and some tools to put in in your mental health first responder toolkit in case somebody came up to you and said, I'm depressed or I'm having thoughts of suicide or whatever. You know what to do. So I would recommend. And they have classes all the time, all over the place. Drugs and alcohol. Okay. I have 2 mental illnesses. However, I have never self-medicated with drugs or alcohol. It's not that I'm morally superior. It's just alcohol would be my drug of choice. The problem is, in addition to mental illness running in our family, long line of alcoholics. My family generally fails the first question on the roadside sobriety test, which is, would you please step out of the car? Boom. So I decided if I never started, I wouldn't have to stop. And I did comedy clubs for 7 years, and the liquor for the comedians in the comedy club is free, and I don't know about you guys, but I tend to overdo things that are free. Yeah. And thirdly, I'm amazingly vain. I'm worried about my weight, and I'd rather eat my calories than drink them. So that's what I'm doing. So I've never had that particular, I've never self-medicated with drugs or alcohol. That's a bullet I dodged. Here's there are a couple of high-profile suicides this past summer. You got to recognize Kate Spade, fashion designer. Yeah, what's happened since I began speaking on depression and suicide is that when something like this happens, all my friends, I get texts, Facebook messages, emails, phone calls. They all want to know why. They all have questions. And it's like they all got together and said, Frank's suicidal? Let's ask him. At some point, I became the national spokesperson for people who are suicidal. She had a history of mental illness and self-medication. And this breaks my heart. Her sister said that she didn't seek inpatient treatment because she did not want to damage, and I'm quoting now, her happy-go-lucky brand of accessories. Yeah. So, and this guy, who's the last season's going to be starting, if it hadn't already started, it's starting now. Parts unknown, I think it is. Anthony Bourdain, same thing, history of drug and alcohol use, self-medicating. He admitted it. And in his life, the question people ask me, and maybe I can demystify this for if there are normal people in the room. The question is, first of all, why would they want to die? And I've told you already. I believe the majority of people don't want to die, they just want to end the pain. And 2, why would somebody who's got fame, fortune, family, why would they have everything? Why would, again, it's not situational. Generally not a situation kick it off. I have triggers, but generally not situational. And here's my answer, and it's in my last TED Talk, which was posted yesterday, is I believe both Kate Spade and Anthony Bourdain just got tired of living. What people who are normal don't know or understand is that having a mental illness is like this. Do you guys know the Greek character Sisyphus? He did something to offend the gods. I think he slept with Zeus's girlfriend or something. And they made him push a rock up a hill every day, get close to the top, roll back down. Every day. And that's what a mental illness is like. When you wake up in the morning, you have a mental illness, there's always a rock, and there's always a hill. Some days the rock is small, and the hill's not so steep. Some days the rock is a boulder, and the hill is Everest. And my guess is, they'd been, putting on a smile, pasting on a smile, and marching through their day in public. So they had to be on a great deal of the time. And one day, they woke up, and they couldn't move the rock. And they said, that's it, I'm done. Alrighty, I promised Carol that we would finish up on a high note. Because this is all about hope and opportunity. Yes, the evolutionary advantages of mental illness, organization, rumination, peregrination, isolation, hibernation, and wait for it, procreation. Every time I spoke to someone who had a child, a young person with a mental illness, first paragraph was always bipolar, OCD, this, that. Second paragraph unfailingly was, but you know what? They're creative, they're smart, they're funny, they're artistic. They have these abilities. And I thought, it's a pattern. Every person I meet whose child has this issue, there seems to be a second set of abilities. So I began to research. I thought, there's got to be something to this. So, let's see, hang on. There's my, I'm the mental health comedian if you want to follow me or see my stuff on YouTube. I mentioned my TED Talks are all on YouTube. And also, that's my Facebook, and then that's my Twitter. So I thought, that's where I got the idea for the evolutionary advantages of mental illness. And then when I had that thought, I thought, but why? Why do those things, those mental illnesses persist? I'll give you a couple of examples. You guys know Johnny Manziel? Yep, Mr. Football, no, Johnny Football. Very famous and popular and successful college football player. Hang on, let me see if I got a little bit ahead of myself, I apologize. What I was going to tell you was, I believe, he was recently diagnosed with bipolar. He had been self-medicating for, I guess, decades. And I believe that bipolar disorder is not so much bipolar as tripolar, 3 poles, because there's manic, depressive, and then in the middle there's this magic space called hypomania. Do you guys know? Hypomania. The problem is that what I believe we should do is treat the mental illness with therapy and medication and embrace, enhance, and energize the mental ableness. And the problem with bipolar is, up until now, they've been treating them with medication, and they almost always medicate them to the middle, or just below the line, the depressive line. If we could somehow hold them in that space, below sleep for days on end, and above the can't eat too much, can't sleep, sleep too much, we could hold them in the middle, because the hypomania state, I believe, is in large part responsible for Johnny Manziel's success. Because here's what happens in hypomania. Energetic, super creative, resilient, euphoric, grandiose goals, confident, charismatic, and takes inspired risks that when they pan out look like sheer genius. I believe that is there. I think that's what got him there. Now, he was self-medicated with drugs and alcohol. So, Johnny had been Manziel. Yeah, because the drugs and alcohol only take you so far. He was either in a manic state or a depressive state, and all these things were going on. Look at his face. This is right after he crashed and burned. He made it all the way to the Cleveland Browns, played 2 years there, flamed out. And I believe it's because the bipolar finally caught up with him. The good news is, as I mentioned, he's been diagnosed. He's getting medication and therapy. He did some time in the Canadian Football League, and I bet you he'll be back in the NFL before too long. On the evolutionary advantages of mental illness, what if those of us diagnosed with a mental illness aren't living with a genetic mutation but an amazing evolutionary adaptation? What if mental illness is, as Malcolm Gladwell said in his book David and Goliath, a desirable disadvantage? You would never wish it on anybody, but it comes with that subset of extraordinary abilities. And if that is the case, why not medication and therapy for the mental illness, and then embrace, enhance, and energize the mental ableness, the flip side of the coin? What would the impact be on a child if you could convince them, oh, you've got a mental illness, no doubt about it. However, here's the good news. You also have a set of mental ableness that your neuronormal peers cannot even approach. They can only dream about it. How would that change the frame for a child? If we could convince them that they're not broken, I don't believe I'm broken. I believe I was made this way. And what would the impact be on their peers? And could we reduce bullying and stigma that way? And here's an example. I was doing a training, and there's a nice young man there whose son, Mason, 5 years old, autism. So I thought I'd test my theory. I said, Mason got any, special abilities? He goes, Frank, funny you should ask. We took him to the swimming pool this summer. Never been in a pool before in his life. Standing there. 10 days later, he had taught himself to swim the Australian crawl and breathe on both sides by himself. And he was fast in the pool. And he's fast on his feet. On land. He said, we were in the Special Olympics, and there's Mason at the starting line, and the gun goes off, and all the other kids take off running. Mason had never run a race before. He didn't know the gun meant go. So his dad's Tom Hanks, Forrest. Like Forrest Gump, his dad goes, run, Mason, run! Mason takes off. The kids had a 20-yard head start. He caught them and passed them. I said to his dad, okay, I do hope you are encouraging him in his athletic pursuits because he obviously loves it and he's really good at it. And here's the plus for Mason. His peers. I could just hear a conversation in my head, a couple of guys talking in 6th grade. Yeah, Mason's a little strange, but you know what? We're getting ready to pick up sides for football. And Mason's my first pick because, man, he's an amazing wide receiver. Nobody can catch up with him. That, I believe, would change the frame for the child and for their peers, reduce stigma and bullying. I was telling my sister about this. I said, my sister has depression and anxiety and panic attacks. And I said, I think we have superpowers. And she goes, yeah, we're not the X-Men, we're the Xanax Men. So what would be the impact on a child if you could convince them? And I encourage children to find a superhero and customize it. I saw the movie Electra. Have you seen Electra with Jennifer Garner? If you listen carefully in the movie, at one point, the young woman she's training, Jennifer Garner comes in the room and the young woman goes, oh, struggling with our OCD, are we? Jennifer Garner goes, I don't have OCD. She goes, really? I heard you counting your steps on your way down here. So if you have OCD and you're a young woman, and I would pick Electra as my avatar. I took the Incredible Hulk. Well, because he's a normal, nice, bookish guy when he's not upset, and then when he gets upset, although I made mine blue, had a friend of mine draw it, and stick out the lip. I'm the Incredible Sulk. So here's the deal. For me, it comes down to I'd be easier to read this. Down to the question, if this, then that, what is the connection? If this, my mental illness, gives me that, my mental ableness, and I believe it does, what is the connection? I believe the connection is why, and I believe we can find the answer in evolution. And I gotta tell you, I'm a little sorry, I feel sorry oftentimes for my neuronormal friends, because, and my sister echoed this, because again, I believe I have these sort of minor superpowers that mere mortals can only dream about. I was driving one day thinking, what if somebody had a pill that I could take one time and I would never be depressed again and I would never have another suicidal thought, but The side effect would be I would never process information like a comedian again. I'd have to give up the way I see the world as a comedian. I thought, no, thank you. No, but give the bill to somebody else. I can teach you to do stand-up. I can teach you to write stand-up. What I cannot teach you to do is process the way I process. I'm on a plane. It's a Delta flight. They've just changed the rules that says you can take your iPhone or iPad, turn it on, use it on takeoff or landing, as long as it's in airplane mode. So the problem is the flight attendant doesn't have that written down anywhere. They just changed the rule. So she's got to make up whatever she's going to say about that. And I'm on the edge of my seat because she's going to have to improv. So she gets done with the seat cushion, floor bath lighting, oxygen mask, the long pause. She goes, ladies and gentlemen, due to new FAA regulation. Then you can almost hear the gears click. Due to new FAA regulation, if you have small equipment, you can continue playing with it. Okay, here's the way I think, and here's why I would not take the pill. I'm the only one on the plane laughing. I am bent over double. My seatmate's like, what? I said, let's review. Before I could review, she comes back on and she goes, if you have large equipment, you're going to have to shove that under the seat in front of you. So I'm down on my knees. I firmly believe that right there is the flip side of my major depressive disorder and chronic. So that is the way I see my imagination. I made the mistake one day of telling some friend of mine one of my daydreams, and when I got done, he goes, man, I gotta get better daydreams. Yeah, because I got casting and blocking and lighting and dialogue and sound bites and previews and trailers. And apparently not everybody daydreams like that. Let's see. And by the way, let's see. Sometimes I'm sorry for my neural number friends. Seems like I have a story for you. Oh, and my sense of humor, by the way, has saved me. Not only has not only benefited me in the way of a career, but it served me well even as a child. I was at the YMCA in Raleigh, which is was a nest of pedophiles. Pedophiles are great networkers. They hire one another, they promote one another. The outgoing pedophile youth director hired the incoming pedophile youth director. And I'm standing in his office one day, and I'm 12 years old. Okay. And so he says to me, and forgive me, it's a little clinical, but he says to me, Frank, have you ever been involved in group masturbation? And I said, Wayne, I never considered masturbation as a team sport. More of an individual sport like golf. And he laughed and he left me alone. And a friend of mine who studies pedophilia said, I'll tell you why he left you alone. Any child 12 years old who's got presence of mind to deflect like that and make it funny is nobody's victim. So my sense of humor saved me that day. Now, let's talk about evolution for a second. I always wondered where bipolar came from. Anthropologists believe that back in the time of cavemen, everybody was pretty much bipolar because you had 4 months in the summertime to gather everything you needed for 8 months in the winter. So they were manic all summer long. They were uber hunters and gatherers, and they were hypersexual because you have to keep the numbers in the tribe up, and the infant death rate, birth death, whatever they call it. You know what I'm talking about. The number of children to survive was low. Then, when the days grow longer and the nights grow colder, they slipped into the depressive phase. Kind of like bears hibernating. They just hunkered down, delivered the kids, did their best to keep them alive until the days began to get longer and the nights began to get warmer. Now, that's bipolar. But what about other mental illnesses? Were they, like bipolar, a survival skill for people that far back? How about OCD? Okay, so you gathered all this stuff for 4 months. Now you got to make it last 8 months. Who better to make it last 8 months than somebody who is obsessively organized? Oh, and cleaning rituals. Somebody in the tribe had to be the one to go, no, don't eat that. Because there was no penicillin, lots of germs. Okay, a buddy of mine goes, what about ADD, ADHD? Where's the survival skill there? Well, And I'm glad, by the way, we didn't have that when I was a kid. I'm sure it was around, but nobody ever mentioned it because I was a class clown, and if it had Ritalin, I would have spent most of my days face down on my desk in a pool of my own saliva. Yeah. And nowadays, it's a handicap. You know, we joke about it. Squirrel! But back then, somebody with a head on a swivel, at a time and a place where everything and everybody could potentially kill you, you know, squirrel, that's funny, but velociraptor, that's important. Yeah, they tend to live longer and eat better if they had ADD or ADHD. So it was a survival skill then, and it is, of course, now it can be seen as a handicap. Hunters and gatherers, ADD. Dyslexia. Do you know this about dyslexics? They have better peripheral vision. They tend to see things in a panoramic fashion instead of just looking, you know. Most of us kind of focus straight ahead and stuff on either side is a bit of a blur. Dyslexics tend to see things in a panoramic. And they're excellent at picking out the anomaly in anything. My joke was, never play Where's Waldo for money with a dyslexic. You're going to lose in a hurry. So if I've got somebody in my tribe who's dyslexic, I'm having them walk point as we're going from like the summer grounds to the winter grounds. So we all come up to the edge of a clearing. There's another bunch of trees over here. Well, everybody else just sees trees and bushes. Dyslexic guy goes, hey, you see that bush next to the big oak? That's not a bush. That's a guy with leaves all over him. So again, a survival skill. I'd have them as pickets at night. I'd have them watching, you know, for anything that was out of the. All right, bottom line. When I did the TED Talk on this, I said, now I know what you're thinking, Frank, that's terribly interesting. But how do we apply that to young people today to improve their lives? How does the hope and opportunity fit into all that? I believe that we should construct the IEP, the Individual Education Plan, to fit the child. I'm actually rather radical in that I don't think every 6-year-old should be in first grade, 7-year-old in second grade. I think it should be grouped by ability and by their interests, and perhaps by a mental illness / mental ableness. For example, ADD, ADHD. A friend of mine taught band in high school. Best students he had were ADD, ADHD. Problem was, you sit them down for 50 minutes to play scales. He said, Frank, first 10 minutes they got better, next 40 minutes, they could have played all day long, would not have got any better. So he went and bought an egg timer and set it for 10 minutes. He goes, all right, scales, 10 minutes. Egg timer goes off, ding. Okay, now we're going to practice the piece you're doing Saturday at the concert. 10 minutes, ding. Okay, now let's practice our breathing for 10 minutes, ding, and then rotated back to the scales. And they grew by leaps and bounds because that's the way they are wired. They're not wired to sit still for 50 minutes and do one thing. Because they're the kid, you know, from way back when whose head was on a swivel. And when you break it down in 10-minute segments, you reduce the tension because the kid doesn't have to try and sit in a chair and be still and focus all that time. Dyslexics. STEM, the STEM curriculum, science, technology, education, mathematics. For dyslexics, I mean, it's all letters and words and numbers and things. And my wife's dyslexic. They're all over the page. She taught herself to cope. But dyslexics are incredibly good at multifaceted, complex tasks. And my wife's an amazing artist. And so why not design the IEP around that and then direct them in a career path? If I had a kid who had dyslexia and it was severe, and we're looking for a career path, and he liked video games, maybe he was addicted to video games, then I would say, hey son, what do you think about being a drone pilot? Because think about this, the drone's flying over the desert, all the normal human beings looking down, they just see desert, rocks, scrub, tree, brush. The dyslexic goes, wait, hold on, that's not a bush, that's the lid on some kind of bunker. Because they can spot the anomaly in just about anything. So not only do you make the IEP fit the child, treat the illness with medication therapy, but embrace, enhance, and energize, and focus them in that direction. OCD, STEM curriculum, science, technology, education, mathematics, because they are into precision and an attention to detail. And science, technology, engineering, and mathematics all have one answer, and there's one way to get to it. Perfect for somebody with OCD. And then have them work in banking or accounting or somewhere where precision and attention to detail is paramount, and they will pay for it. And bipolar, medicate to the safe altitude and let them do their creative thing. In Hollywood, they've actually figured out a way, because a lot of things are deadline driven. They hire people with bipolar knowing they can work for probably 4 or 5 hours a day longer than their normal peers, and they can do it for weeks on end, and then when they crash and burn, they just say, great, we'll see you when we see you. They've taken advantage of we're getting close. So here's the bottom line. We've barely scratched the surface on figuring out why our brains go wrong the way they do. Some of the most interesting research shows that what we believe is a mental illness is in fact not a singularity, but a combination of mental illness and mental illness. And I believe we could reduce stress on children, young people, stigma and bullying, and give them hope for the future if we would treat the mental illness, therapy, medication, and then embrace, enhance, energize, and celebrate their mental ableness. I think that would, there's my message of hope. Question? Oh, I apologize. I meant to, there's a theme here that you guys didn't see. All these people, that, by the way, is all the stuff that Johnny Manziel did when he was in his hypomanic stage. Here's all the stuff he did when he was either in a manic or a depressive stage. These are all famous people with bipolar. These are famous people with depression. These are famous people with OCD. These are famous people with ADHD or ADD. And famous people with dyslexia. So what I'm saying is, you don't have to have a mental illness to be rich and famous. But it doesn't hurt. Questions? Yes, I'm wearing underwear. And by the way, I'm going to stick around afterwards if you have questions you don't want to ask in front of the entire audience. I do that at colleges. I'm crazy, can you help me? You might want to save that till we go outside and share that in private.
Any questions?
Questions?
Let's give him another round.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So I am the one that stands in the way of you going home tonight. So in your little packet, we referenced the purple sheets. So you've got one here, and there's even a little secret code on how to put your code at the top of the page. If you didn't see that, that's on the white page. And then there's also the consent form that's in here that we ask that you fill that also and turn that in at the registration desk as you're leaving today. I think one of the challenges that we have in the field as people that work and have either walked in this journey ourselves or are helping people along this recovery path and the recovery pathway that they choose, is we come to events like this and then we have to go back to work tomorrow. I think we're going back to work tomorrow. Tomorrow's Friday, right? Most of us are going back.